So it's a slight change for the normal timetable for us this week. We're at the Geneva Motor Show. Now I know it's normally about me smoking cars around and reviewing them, but the Geneva Motor Show is the best one of the year. It's huge, yet it's quite contained, and it's got everything. And this year there is, wait for it, a new Ferrari hypercar, a new McLaren hypercar, there's a new Alfa Romeo rear-wheel drive sports car, there's a new Lamborghini limited run hypercar, everything's here. So we'll have a look around, meet some people, look at some cars. Oh, and there's a new GT3, and in the middle of it we might do a bit of driving as well, just to keep people interested. So here we are, the Geneva 2013 show report. This has to be one of the stars of the show, doesn't it? The amazing new McLaren P1. It's a number fest for junkies like me. 903 horsepower, 727 of which comes from a 3.8 litre twin turbo V8 that was first largely seen in the 12C a couple of years ago. The numbers are outrageous. 0 to 60 miles an hour in less than 3 seconds. Wait for this, 0 to 125 miles an hour in less than 7 seconds, and this is the number that totally fries my brain. 0 to 186 in less than 17 seconds, which is, I think, 6 seconds faster than a McLaren F1. It's absolute lunacy. It's sitting in track mode at the moment, looks like it's sucking the floor up. It actually is 50 millimeters lower on that ride height. This car will sustain 2 Gs during cornering and braking. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. But the result is surely one of the most impressive cars of the show. Stunning. Look at this beautiful caliper here. This is the first time that Acabano, which is the company that supplies McLaren's F1 braking systems, has been working on a road car. It's a layered carbon ceramic disc, so it's a slightly different process to a normal one. That allows it to run 150 degrees hotter than a normal carbon ceramic, so just more performance everywhere. And while we're here, this is a Pirelli P0 Corsa. This one's got no markings on it at all, looks suspiciously development spec. The tyre is bespoke to McLaren, they've worked on it completely, and this tyre is the one that will pull 2 Gs in brakes and in cornering. So just look at this thing, look at the work going on at the back of it, look at the diffuser. I mean, look what's going on with the rear wing. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing, a feast for the eyes. And I have to say, standing here right now, or rather crouching here right now, that sort of Lamborghini concept bullshit thing over there is starting to look a bit stupid next to this pucker, new style, hybrid supercar. I can't believe I'm saying this. Lamborghini's built 3 or 4 of these Veneno special concept cars, 740 horsepower, amazing bodywork. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think it looks like an absolute dog's dinner. I'm really worried about Lamborghini. At this show, you've got McLaren and Ferrari unveiling landmark hybrid hypercars, and these guys are still cocking about strapping bits of carbon fibre onto an Aventador chassis, and I just don't get it. It just looks like they're trying too hard and they haven't got a clear direction. The warning bells are out there. The Aventador is performing, I know, but the Gallardo is now 10 years old. And this is what they're doing at the top end. I mean, look at the back of it. It looks like I got some LSD wedged down my neck and decided to draw my own supercar. Not good. Okay. The music has stopped. This is the new GT3, probably the most talked about car on forums that hasn't been released in a long time. And all the conjecture was mostly wrong. There's going to be a Metzger engine, it's going to have a manual gearbox. No. It has a development of the DFI engine that revs to 9,000 RPM. It is PDK only, but with all sorts of trickery. Pull the paddles together and you can clutch kick it, all sorts of stuff like that, but there's no manual gearbox and it has 475 horsepower. Earlier, Mr. Poininger said to me that he's doing pre-season testing with the thing. Okay, driving it back to back with a 4-litre RS. They were swapping the whole time, and after a while, he didn't want to get back into the 4-litre, wanted to stay in the new car, but he would say that, wouldn't he? He would say that. We'll have a look around it now. Centre lock hubs, some pretty awesome styling. It's a lovely interpretation on the standard 991, no longer the narrow body. This is based on the wide body Carrera 4 shell. Massive performance, sub 730 at the ring, not that really matters to most people. Do you like it? I think it looks fantastic. Is there a manual gearbox option or should there be one? That will be an issue that rolls on forever. At the moment, I'm not quite sure actually. I wish there was a manual GT3, but I suppose, does this leave space for a manual RS? I think we'll talk to Andreas in a minute and find out what he has to say. possibly the last thing the E63 needed was more power. But Mercedes has given it more power. It now has 585 horsepower from its twin-turbocharged V8 motor. It also now has, in most markets, four-wheel drive, although in the UK we remain two-wheel drive only because we're right-hand drive Luddites. Now, I'd love to tell you about this car for hours, and I could, and we could pour over it. But it'd be more fun if you watched me try and wrestle it up a Spanish hillside, wouldn't it? Yes, 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 it's another new AMG. But hang on a minute, they've made it look a bit different, they've given it more power, they've added four-wheel drive if you live in certain countries, and it sounds fantastic, let alone the fact that if you look at the throttle pedal, it will go sideways. It was made for video, so why wouldn't I review it? Exactly. The new E63 looks better than the old E63, does it? I'm not sure. I think it does. I think on the whole, this is a very successful facelift. That front sort of big gapey chin bit, that looks much better in the flesh than it does in the pictures. Interestingly, I always thought the old E63 was the best way of showing that sort of hip crease that you had on this E-Classe, or rather the previous E-Classe, that actually on the lesser cars with a narrower track and smaller wheels, that kink wasn't that impressive, although it was better on the estate car. So it's lost some of its identity. It's not so obviously an E-Classe now, and it does look more sort of homogenised, more of 5 Series, I suppose, down the side. But then, quite clearly, Mercedes-Benz felt the need to restyle the car. As an E63, well, it's a mighty weapon. There's some quite complex spec differentiation going on here, though. From now on, in America, you buy your E63 as four-wheel drive, so you lose the chance to just do skids everywhere. But in terms of all-weather ability, you now have a car that rivals an RS6, which is pretty exciting. And as an estate, wow, that's quite a package. In the UK, you still buy the car in right-hand drive as two-wheel drive, and this is where it gets more complicated. This left-hand drive, two-wheel drive car I'm driving now doesn't have the S-Pack, which gives the extra power and torque. But in the UK, you can order a right-hand drive car with the S-Pack, so 580-something horsepower and all that torque. Very complicated. But the upshot is, this thing is an absolute hooligan. You can light the tyres up at pretty much any speed, any gear. It feels monumentally fast. I mean, palpably faster than an M5 in many circumstances. It's a great, great car. They've put a bit more weight in the steering than the last E63 I drove. The ride is very supple in sort of normal damper mode. We've got two options, sort of medium sport and full sport. Don't tend to use those. But this is a really nice balance of everyday comfort and quite a lot of control. The car's on eeny-weeny 18-inch wheels, which I know won't be to everyone's taste, but for me gives a bit more flex in the sidewall. And those tyres are, I see, Michelin Pilot Sport 3s. And the tread design looks quite new to me. I've not seen a tyre that looks like that. So clearly Mercedes and AMG have been developing new tyres with new partners. The key thing about this car for me is that of all the stupidly fast saloon cars, so I mean, you know, Jaguar, Mercedes, Audi and the others, I reckon this is the nicest one to drive slowly. And let's face it, that's how most of the time it will be driven. If you get right up it, this MCT gearbox is slower to shift to manual mode than the M5's DCT, I'll give you that. And it is kind of lacking some of that absolute precision. The motor is just less responsive to small throttle inputs than the BMWs, but really, in everyday driving, leave it in sport and just put your foot down and, I mean, that's nuts. That's faster than the very, very fastest supercars that I used to test 10 years ago, and we have it in an E-Class body. Neil thinks it looks, I quote, boring, but I don't. I just think it looks very subtle, quite taut, and ready to go and literally chomp through M cars. Adding four-wheel drive to the E63 makes some quite profound changes to it. To start with, the traction is astonishing, as you'd expect. You come out of second gear turns now, and you give it the whole lot, and it just goes. It's extraordinary. Because it's an E63, you're waiting for the oversteer. but it never comes. Okay, on a very damp surface, if you give it everything, it will oversteer. The other thing that's interesting is the gearbox. I've defended the MCT gear change for a while now because it isn't as quick as a DSG, but it's actually a nicer automatic gearbox. But this thing is now so quick at getting out of a corner, you find yourself rowing up the manual gears and the gearbox doesn't feel quick enough now. It's interesting, it's put demands on the gearbox as a driver that weren't there before. The question for me is, does this four-wheel drive nature alter the fundamental character of the car? I think it does. This feels more Audi RS product now, of course it does. It steers better, it still will oversteer if you give it the lot, so there's a rear bias to the four-wheel drive, which is great, but it's lost that hooligan element, and suddenly you're travelling a whole lot faster point to point, which, as I've said, puts those demands on the gearbox, because in manual mode it now does feel too slow. But an estate one of these, with the four-wheel drive system and the S-Pack, I mean, that is a weapon, isn't it? Is that the ultimate go anywhere, do anything family car? It must be. But personally, and this is where I'm going to sound like a flat earther, I like the two-wheel drive car. I think in the UK we're quite lucky because it remains a hot rod. It doesn't have that ability on wet roads and it won't be as quick in the middle of December, but it's just so exciting managing all that oversteer. But I can see that when the four-wheel drive does eventually come to the UK, maybe in the next model, it won't in this one. Although Mercedes is saying it will import you a left-hand drive car if you really, really want one. It's going to be an absolute weapon. How much faster can these cars get? Impressive. Anyone that takes on the Porsche Cayman had better be absolutely committed to the task, because that is a great car. But Alfa has launched the 4C here. This is the production version. I'm not too sure about these headlights here, but it sets a very, very important set of questions for us. Is it worth having a more affordable engine in an exotic chassis, a carbon chassis in the case of this car, for ultimate handling, the stiffest structure possible? Or should you have a steel structure like a Cayman and end up with a more exotic six-cylinder engine? This car will have 240 horsepower from a 1.75 litre four-cylinder turbocharged motor, but it will be very, very light. We're looking at a price of maybe 50 grand with some extras on it, I think, that's what I'm hearing. So it's going to be an expensive car, but the Cayman's not going to have it all its own way. I think it's an exciting addition to the marketplace. I just want to drive one now. One note of caution, I had a look around the interior. We'll show you some shots now. Some of the materials are quite basic. Can they make a virtue of that as a lightweight thing? I'm not sure, but it worried me initially. Somehow the new Golf GTI looks very familiar, doesn't it? Because the Golf theory is evolution rather than revolution. The GTI now has 220 PS as a non-performance car. I say that because there's a special version with another 10 horsepower that's called the Performance, the GTI Performance. So that must make that the non-performance, I suppose. I think the Golf GTI has always been the best all-round performance car, but it's coming under real pressure at the moment. By the time this thing lands in the UK and you've added a smattering of extras, it's going to be what? Late £20,000. That's going to put it squarely in line with the BMW M135i, a car which I crow on about too much, but that car has over 300 horsepower, and this one, even as a performance pack, has 230. There's a 50 foot-pounds of torque advantage over the outgoing car, and I have to say, it looks like a quality item inside and out. But is the Golf GTI's marketplace shifting so quickly around it that it can't respond? I'm sure there'll be an R version later on, but right now, it looks like a great car that's moving into an increasingly tough market. You know when you were a kid and you had a BMX helmet but it didn't have a visor on it, and you got some like perspex that you had lying around the house and cut it and then used gaffer tape to put it on the front to sort of protect you from stones when you're racing your mates? That's what KTM's done with the Crossbow. I can't look at that, it's absolutely appalling. Behind me in that scrum over there is a brand new Ferrari hypercar, and it's called, this is why I have to just take control of myself, La Ferrari. We're not joking, it's called La Ferrari, so I presume in the UK it's going to be called The Ferrari, and maybe in Germany it'll be Das Ferrari. Let's see. Forget about the silly name though, because when you actually look at this thing and scrutinise the numbers, it's off the scale. 963 horsepower, 800 of that from a combustion engine, the rest from electric motors, so it's high KERS, which should be extraordinary. Now after the P1, how is the numbers battle? There's no claimed weight on this yet, but the 0 to 186 mile an hour time is 15 seconds, whereas the McLaren's is 17. 2 seconds at that kind of speed is outrageous. Think about that. 0 to 186 in 15 seconds. A few years ago, a really, really fast car would do 0 to 100 miles an hour in that time. Have a look around the car now, some of the details. I think it's pretty extraordinary looking. Some people saying it looks a bit like a pumped up 458. Well, the 288 GTO was a pumped up 328. That didn't look too bad, did it? A great day for supercars, a great day for hypercars. Enjoyed my time at the show. Hope you enjoyed it too. And I'm going to go now.